All right, we're back. We are Comp 1014 in the summer 2017 semester here at George Brown College. And we're talking about game production concepts first. There's going to be a couple things we're going to do. We're going to hit game production concepts from the book. Remember that the stuff we're doing in the book, the stuff that I talk about in the book is going to be on your exam. Anything I don't talk about from the book, not going to be on your exam. I can't ask you to do stuff that I haven't talked about. Really, I could, but there's a lot of stuff in this course, and I'm only going to focus on those areas that I've talked about. Also, I'm going to talk about some stuff that's not in the book that also is going to be on the exam that I've already talked to you about. GitHub is a good example of that from last week, right? So last week we talked about GitHub. I use a kind of a big example on how to put GitHub together and how to use GitHub with command line, and there's different forms. What are the 3 reasons we use GitHub? Who remembers what those 3 reasons are? 3 real reasons, right? Yes? Tell me. Backup. What else? Anyone else? Revision control. That's a good one. What's the 3rd one? Yes. Documentation. Yeah, there's another real good one. Documentation is a good reason. Collaboration. Yes, those are the 3 things. So backup, revision control, collaboration. Those are the 3 things. I'm going to ask that question on the exam. If you don't remember that, I told you about it a bunch of times. That's on you. So we talked about GitHub last week. Today, we're going to be talking about game production a little bit. I'm not going to go through every one of these slides and talk about all of them. I'm also going to include some additional examples, so please pay attention. We'll do this first. Then we're going to get into your requirements for today, right? As well as requirements for next week. We'll talk about requirements for next week. So just before we start, I want to get an idea of how good you guys are in terms of your production, and I think we might be able to put together a little poll. So let's do polleverywhere.com and see if I can do this. Maybe I will be able to do it, maybe not. So put it in we'll create a new poll. So what a poll is it's going to be a very simple, multiple choice kind of poll, and the question is going to be, how do you feel your team is doing, right? So, great, fantastic, couldn't be better, right? That'll be one that we can answer, right? The other one is, it's okay, but communication sucks, right? Team, what team? Right? I want that one, right? And let's have one more, right? So it's good. Communication's okay. But we're behind. Right? So those are 3 things. And when I say we're behind in terms of your production schedule, right? So I'm going to create it. So join me. You can get to this poll. Sorry for the guys in the morning. Yeah, I don't care about that. You can get to this poll by going on to, you can text learn to 37607. It will not charge your phone. Or you can go to pollev.com/learn. That is my home site. And to get an active thing, you can put in your response, right? Yeah, and then we'll see if what we get in terms of your how you feel about stuff. Now, I'm doing it anonymous because if I go around and ask everybody, I could do that. We just don't have time. And I want to get a sense. It may not be exactly what you're feeling, right? Because there might be something else, that covers you, right? But try and hit one of these 3, whichever one describes you best. And let me explain why I want this. It's because I really want to understand from your perspective how you're feeling. Feeling is really important here because like I said before, that your producer has no real power, right? And we all have to support him or her, right? Actually, no, it's going to be him because there's no her producer, right? But we got to support him because you know what? He's got no power. And there's a lot to do between now and next week, right? So, you know, that's why I want to check this out. Okay, I'll give it another minute so everyone has a chance to vote. Please don't vote twice. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I get an idea of where we're at. So you can see that what I'm seeing is some people feel, a small amount feel that there's no team. I'm going to close it off now in a second. I'll give it 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7. All right, so it's closed. So let's talk about this. So it looks like, you know, for the most part, you're okay. It says most people say they're okay, but you're behind. That's a given. I knew you would be. It's okay, but communication sucks. That's pretty bad. I mean, you're probably behind and communication sucks, right? That's probably what it means. Good, fantastic, could be better. Couldn't be better. That's good, but there's not a lot of that. I want this to be better later next time we do this, right? Team, what team? That's really, really super bad. That means that you guys don't even have a team. You don't feel like you're part of a team, which conflicts with the other three, right? Because that means that one person, for sure, at least one person feels that you guys aren't part of a team at all, right? Or they don't feel like they're part of the team. They're not being included. So one of the things I'm hearing here in the field is, can I fire somebody? Okay, so can you fire anybody in your team? Really, can you fire anybody in your team? Who's the manager? Who's the real manager in this whole thing? Me, right? So I could fire you. That means you'd get 0, right? I fired someone last semester. I'll tell you the story. I did. I fired someone last semester, but I didn't give them 0. I just moved them to another team randomly, right? That was like firing, because now what are they doing? How are they going to meld in with that other team who's full, right? They needed it anyway. He actually became really productive. It actually worked out for him, because if it wasn't for him, the other team would have really gone bad, right? So it worked out. But, you know, in general, firing, I mean, you're going to fire yourself at the end of the day. If you don't participate, I'm going to know. Someone's going to say it to me. It's going to happen. I'm going to ask every single time. And it's not because I want to be mean. It's because, you know, we all have to pull our weight here. There's only a small team to produce a lot of stuff every week, right? So you're just doing yourself and your team a disservice, but not producing and not meeting, not showing up, not communicating. Communication is really the key. I'm going to go around and check that later. But for now, let's talk about production a little bit. Now, so last semester, you spent a lot of time in pre-production, right? Like talking about planning, and you looked at your plans for your game, and that didn't work out, right? Because I restructured everything this semester. Said, well, that's a nice idea, guys. Thank you very much. You had a nice exercise in doing your plan. That's great. But now I want you to replan this new game with these new members, or maybe the same members, smaller game, that I want you to do. And really, the idea is to implement the stuff that you've planned, right? Now we're going to do that it's an iterative process. When we start off, again, this stuff will be on your exam, so please try and pay attention. We start off with, when I talk about project management, I mean, we really haven't done a lot of project management up until now. I don't think you guys have a formal project management course that you guys have done yet, yeah? So I got to kind of introduce some of these concepts that hopefully can help you to produce a project later on. And one of the concepts that I have to talk about is this idea of the Deming cycle. That's what it's called, right? Plan, do, check, act. Let's take a look at that a little bit. I kind of drew it on the board earlier today, but I'm going to make this a little larger so you can see it. But the idea here is that, of course, you can't see it. Of course. Let's just make it large.
Yes, do the preview. It'll probably be
maybe.
No, never mind.
Let me see. No. Well, what I'm going to do is actually I will dump this on Slack for you, right? So let's go to Slack. So I've got Slack here, and I'm just going to dump it on Slack so you have this image, right? And it's a good one to kind of remember. Plan, do, check, act. The Deming cycle, that's what it is. So you can kind of look at it yourself on your machine. This is it. Actually, it looks better in Slack. So this is neat. It says, what is the goal? What is now preventing us from achieving this goal? That's plan. So you have a plan for this week to do something. You have a goal, a set of features you're going to meet, right, for this goal. So that is the plan part, and that's in your cycle. And then you have the do part, where you actually implement what's in your plan, right? And what is one step you can take toward the goal right now, right? That's an example of what to do. And then, did it work? Test it, analyze it. Did it work? Yes. That's the check part. And if so, great. If not, let's iterate again, right? And go back, to change stuff. So let's standardize and stabilize what worked, or go through this process again. And you're going to see this Deming cycle, this plan, do, check, act over and over again. In fact, it should happen either one or more times every week when you guys meet. Right? Does that make sense? If it doesn't happen, if you don't go through some kind of cycle like this, some kind of plan, what ends up happening is that there's no way of checking to see if you're being successful. Here's another question for you guys, right? Without asking a poll, I want a show of hands, right? When you met last week with your team, did you guys all sit down all at once? Yeah, and I see some faces nodding, and yeah, you did, yeah, I would say yeah. Was it productive, like the meeting, right? Would you find yourself productive immediately, or did you do something else, right? Anybody have a different experience? Some people nod, say, yeah, it was productive. No, you're shaking your head. It was productive, yeah. How about people who don't say who was not productive last week, right? It's okay to say no. I'm not going to judge anybody, right? Not this week. You guys are smiling. That means you guys weren't productive. I can tell. You guys are lying, right? I'll help you out later on. So here's the thing. This is the trick for me. Whenever I get together with my teams, and if I try and get to work, you don't sit down. You sit down, you start chitter-chatting. How was your day? What's going on? What game did you play? What movie did you watch? What show did you watching now? What are you doing right now? How's your girlfriend? Can I have a smoke? Can I go for a drink? You want to go for a coffee? Blah, blah, blah. What are you doing after? How's your load? What's C++ look like? What's Unity sound like? All this kind of stuff you're going to talk about, but you're not going to get any of this work done, man, right? So here's what I want you producers to do, all right? This week coming up. Stand up for 10 minutes. Stand up for 10 minutes and have a huddle for 10 minutes. Can't sit down. That's required. No cell phones present when you huddle, right? And the producer's going to sit there and ask you, okay, let's do an update. The producer's going to have you can have a pad of paper or some kind of clipboard, an iPad, something that you're going to be writing on, and is going to go around and say, okay, so here's what we're doing today, 10 minutes. We're getting together and we're working on this thing. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What did you do last week? What did you do? Get an update from everybody. Have a conversation. And now some of you might say, well, hold on a second, Tom. We didn't even meet last week, right? Just putting it out there. I know it's going to happen. I know it's there, right? We didn't even meet last week. We did everything virtually, or we didn't have time to meet anyway, right? Guys, not meeting for this class is unacceptable. I'm telling you right now, it's going to bite you so deep in your, it's going to really hurt, right? You have so much to do for next week. Who has something that they can show me this week? I'm going to go around. If you got something to show me, I'm going to go around and look at your game this week. And if you've got nothing to show me, that's a good indicator that you're way behind the 8 ball compared to last week, right? Last week, you had a chance. You had an opportunity to meet. Every week, I want you to consider it a week of work. If you didn't meet last week, or if you couldn't produce anything last week, you know what that means? You didn't work, right? That's bad. That means you didn't show up. How can I pay you if you didn't show up? Think about this. If I was your manager and we're running these projects and you're not showing up for work, I can't pay you. So part of being productive is getting together, and this is part of what I'm talking about here. Remember, this kind of stuff that I'm talking about, plan, do, check, act, that's going to be on your exam. Guaranteed, 100%, right? I'm going to ask you, right? When you get together, you got to iterate through that cycle. First, you plan what we're going to do, but you have a plan, right? Last week I asked you, one of the things I said, what are the functionalities or what are the tasks that you want to complete, right? To get to your first playable, right? Okay, now this week I'm going to ask, what are the tasks that you didn't complete What is left to complete to get to your first playable? It's on your lab 3 up on Blackboard already, right? I need to know these things because you're gonna put them down. How about this one? Another question I have on Blackboard is, what worked well? What didn't work well? What are you gonna do differently, right? I want to know those things, right? I want you to be candid about it. Okay, I'm gonna ask a couple people. Can you tell me what the difference between honesty and candor is? Honesty and candor, right? Anybody? What's the difference between honesty and candor?
Well, in my opinion, it's like one is sort of you have like a filter of what you say.
Okay, and then?
And then it's like professional stuff, but the other one is just like, oh, we did jack shit.
All right. So which one do you think I want you to do? Do I think that I want you? Do I want you to be filtered honesty? Is that what I want from you guys, or do I want you to be dead honest? Okay. Can we be dead honest though? Really, it's really hard, right? Because what if I'm dead honest with you and I tell you, you know what? I think what you did sucked, right? That's a kind of hard thing to think about. And I bring this up here when we talk about production, because working together is one of the biggest problems we have, right? This exercise we're doing for this whole semester is working together. It's not a one-man or one-woman show. Yeah.
I think you could be like honest, but respectful.
Okay.
Constructively.
Constructively honest. I like the thinking. All right. But here's the problem with that. So here's the problem. We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, right? We don't want to say something like, you know what, your artwork really sucks, right? That's not constructive. But it might be really true though. It might really suck, right? So how can I say that a little differently? I might say something like this: it doesn't meet requirements, right? It doesn't match the design of the game. Our design plan for the game, your artwork does not meet the design plan for the game, right? There's nothing wrong with saying that, right? Still not quite candid though, is it? Right? It's better to say, I'm telling you right now, it's better to say, that really sucks, man. I really don't like it. And I really don't like it because it doesn't match the style of the game. I'm sorry to tell you that. And as an artist or as an art director, you should not have a thick skin, not have a thin skin, because we're not talking about you. It's not about you. I know we're all tied into our words. I write a word in an essay, and if an editor comes along and scratches it out, I'm like, oh man, I feel hurt. That word belongs to me. It took a long time to put those 4 letters together. You know which 4 letters I'm talking about, right? So I put those 4 letters together, and God damn it, I'm being questioned. I'm being criticized. I hate it. It feels bad, right? It's not about you. You have to separate in the real world. You have to separate you from your work. Your work is not you, and you are not your work. It's representative of you, right? But it's not you. So if I say something like, I don't think this meets, it doesn't mean that I don't think you meet, that I don't like you, right? And so we have to establish these norms. When you get together with your team, I want you to start going closer and closer to being candid with each other, right? Pure candor. I'm talking about like, you know what? I don't think that meets our functionality. I think that functionality is just not quite there. I think we need to move a little forward. I think this doesn't quite work. Like, use those words, right? Or, you know what? I really like this. I think it's exactly what we're looking for. You know what? Let's have a little bit more of this. You know what? I don't like this because I think it's inefficient. It's really, really slow. I can see that it's really slowing. Real feedback that I want to give, my team members. So that's the first thing. So we plan it, we do it. When we win the check process, this is where we give feedback to our team members. And everybody here is responsible or required to start giving feedback to each other because, okay, who's the art person in this team in the front here? Who's the art person? Okay, so you're making the art. Here, I want to give you an example. Okay, so I want you to tell me, you made the art and I checked off on it. I said, yeah, it's good. But inside, I hate it, right? So another week goes by, 2 weeks go by, we use his artwork, and then I have a release, and then when it comes down to it, right, you're criticized for the art. Wow, man, I give some feedback, me, the manager, gives some feedback, says, I don't know where you guys got that art, but it doesn't really meet your plan, your requirements. I just don't understand where you got that, right? And now I'm gonna ask who checked off on it. Who's responsible to check off for his art? The designer, right? Who's the designer in your team? Hi, Emma. So you checked off, let's suggest this. So you checked off on his artwork, but you didn't like it, right? Suppose this, I'm gonna put the scenario for it, right? You didn't like his artwork, but you checked off on it because you didn't want to hurt his feelings. And now we're at release time, and I go, Emma, what happened? You're like, well, I kind of thought you matched. Did you like it? And then in production, when in front of him, you say, no, I didn't really like it that much. So now It's like 4 weeks later, let's say, right? And he's just been told in front of everybody that you don't like his artwork. But meanwhile, you told him you did, right? How is he going to trust you again, right? It's way, way better, guys. Guys, it's better. I'm sorry, but it's better to just say it. I don't like it way early. Because you don't say it early, what happens is later on, it's like a big snowball, right? It's like a big snowball. It's like lying, right? It's like, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you're only telling part of the truth, right? If Emma, if you're only telling part of the truth, Emma, I'm sorry, Emma, I got to use you again, right? If Emma's only telling part of the truth, is she really telling the truth? It's called prevarication, right? When I prevaricate, right, it's like I'm being dishonest. So even though I'm telling part of the truth, that's why they say, you know, do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, right? The whole unvarnished truth is what they're asking for, right? Without any kind of filtering. So help you God, right? And the reason why it's like that, because if you don't tell the truth, you can paint a different picture with part of the truth, right? We don't want to paint a different picture for people here. We want to give them the exact feedback they need to improve. If you want your team to be a high-performing team, right, you've got to tell the truth. And you got to tell the truth as candidly as possible. I know it's hard because you don't want to hurt each other's feelings, right? Especially if it's your buddy and your buddy's not producing. That's the worst. You go drinking with this guy or girl, right? And you do stuff with this person and you play video games with this person, but they're just not producing. That's even harder to do because you got to say, buddy, you know, this really sucked, right? And it's hard for him to, he might even ignore you or she might ignore you, right? You can't, you gotta put it down into work terms and say, it just doesn't meet. It doesn't meet, right? And that's enough because they'll know what you mean because we talked about it right here. It doesn't meet requirements. Our business requirements say, A, you've produced B, it doesn't meet. It doesn't matter if I like you or not, right? You need to rework this thing, right? I know I went on a lot about that, but there's no other way to say that, right? So you've gone through this cycle and you're going to do this cycle iteratively over and over again, multiple times, maybe a week, or at least once a week. You should go through the cycle where you're deploying different functionality to your app, right? Or artwork, or talking about your design, or doing your PowerPoint, or doing your documentation, or whatever. There's lots of opportunity to give each other feedback. You guys shouldn't share anything. You shouldn't be working in stealth mode here, right? It's not like, you know, I produce my art and I don't tell anybody about it until the end. Hey, I don't want to show you. I'm not ready yet. Right? No, man, show me early. If I don't like it early, I can redirect you, right? If I don't see it to the last moment, how can I redirect you, right? That's why today I'm going to sit with each of your teams, take a look at you guys and say, okay, show me your work, right? And if it sucks, guys, I'm going to tell you it sucks. I'm not going to hold back because it's going to suck really a lot later if I don't tell you now, right? All right, so going back to any questions around this, by the way?
Can you just assume that ACT is like true again? Like other really distinct like processes or?
Well, what ACT means is, if you think about what ACT is okay, so we planned, whatever our plan is, we deployed, that's in the do phase or execute. Check, we're going to basically do some quality assurance, testing, playability, those kind of things, right? Okay, fine, we found, these are our findings. What are our results? ACT is analyze the results and include them back into the plan so we can improve that functionality for the next time.
It's more like a review, really.
Yeah.
Okay.
But plan, do, check, ACT, it's the standard way I want you to look at it. It's our iterative cycle that we're going to be doing over and over again. All right, so we talked about this. So there's different parts of the production cycle. There's the design piece, right? That's for the designer, right? Which should be at least one of your team. There's the art production piece, and then there's the engineering piece. Working together, I've already kind of talked about that today. I'm going to talk about it again next week. I'm not going to cover that section of the PowerPoint. It's there for you to read, right? Again, up on Blackboard. But let's talk about design a little bit, right? So, you know, your designing is still in play right now. One of the ways we can do design is by producing a prototype. Has anyone ever done a paper prototype for a game, ever? Have you ever made any kind of board game, anybody, their own role-playing game, anything like that? Yeah, you made your own role-playing game. That's awesome, right? What'd you do? What game did you base it off?
I made a game for my law class.
A law class? Oh, that's
And
cool.
it was like made out of Lego, and then had to use like watch and skate around and like, do all sorts of things.
I like it. I like it. So Lego game for law. That's neat. But I want you to think of it this way. So imagine if you're going to make this game that you're making right now into a board game. Okay. There actually are classes in university, even here, I believe, at George Brown, where we actually get you to make a paper prototype. I would try it out if I were you. I know it takes a little bit of time, and you're like, we have no time for that, right? But the more you spend doing this thing and planning it out, right, then the great thing about that is you get to an idea of your mechanics, right? And from a designer perspective, you really should understand how your mechanics function. And the best way to do that is to paper it out, right? And so, I mean, so some people might say, well, hold on, what if my game is more reflex-based, you know? How can I paper that out, right? Well, think about it in terms of turns, right? I take a turn, you take a turn, right? You might play the enemy. I'm going to play the player, and you're going to play all of the enemy. Like if I'm making a game between me, like a top-down shooter game, and it's a board game, I want you to play one person to play the enemy, one place for the player, and the enemy can only move the amount of pixels or space on the board as they would normally move in one frame, right? So everyone kind of moves a little bit, one frame at a time, and so you can see how things are moving to kind of simulate what it's like to play the game or do the game without actually coding a damn thing. You guys are way past that point, by the way. By now, you should be able to already have movement and all that kind of stuff. But prototyping is a real thing that we do in the industry. It's something, especially when it comes to web games or any other kind of game, even when you're doing things with Unity, which is actually another prototyping engine for me, or Unreal. It's good to paper it out. Is to actually create your paper prototype, and so it saves you a lot of hassle, because maybe if you have a mechanic in mind that you want to make work, and a good example of this that we talked about last week is if I want to make a mechanic for a platformer, let's say that's a grappling hook mechanic. I mean, it's a common, we've seen it in other platformers before. So I have this grappling hook mechanic. So I shoot my grappling hook up and I swing over from one platform to the other. Let's just say that's my mechanic for the game, right? Okay, that's a nice idea, but then in play, once you start drawing it out, you're like, oh crap, the platforms I can swing by, they have to be pretty close, right? But you wouldn't have known that unless you actually papered it out, right? Like actually prototyped it out. And that saves you steps in terms of coding it out, right? Because now you know that the only time that you can swing across from one platform to the other with a grappling hook is if they're pretty close together. Otherwise, it may not work. Or maybe the grappling hook can actually stretch. Like the actual rope you can actually stretch it out by pressing a button. So they go, and it can keep stretching out until you get to the other side. But in order for you to figure that out, you've got to figure out how much energy it takes, how many points. Maybe you're going to make a mechanic in the board game. And if the board game really sucks and is boring, guess what? Your video game is going to suck and it's going to be boring, right? Just saying, right? So it's a good way of checking the mechanics out before you do any coding. So prototyping. So one of the things that we want to try and do is when we're coding a game is we want to work with the producer, right? Because the producer's got to be in charge. I mean, one of his or her responsibilities is making sure that the plan has been implemented, right? We talked about this as part of the producer's responsibility, right? But again, in this scenario, in the real world, yeah, producer can say, you know what, you're fired if you're not producing. But in this scenario, you can't really do that. So you're going to have to work and use your politics, your diplomacy skills, right, to say, hey, buddy, I need this to be done. So what if the person that you've asked to get something done isn't producing? What can you really do? Truly, you can do something. What can you really do? I want some ideas from each of the groups here. I'm going to start with this group here. What can you do if you're the producer and your team's not producing? What can you do? Give me some ideas.
Do it yourself.
Do it yourself. Okay, that's enough. Okay, so I'm a manager, right? And I'm going to do my employee's job, right?
I know it's silly, but if you can't fire
If I have to do an employee's job, then I want to fire them, right?
Yeah.
Okay, what else?
Fire them on time.
Fire, but you can't do that in here. So what can you do in a school environment? Yeah.
Just assign the task to someone else that I can see that's actually doing something.
Okay, so you could reassign the task. What else?
You could report to the manager, shall we say.
You could report to the manager. That would be escalating. If you escalate to me, that means you've now identified a problem in your team.
Yeah.
right? That means that my ears as a dog are perked up. I'm like, whoop, right? What? You guys have a problem? Now I'm gonna come down on you. When you do that, you can usually rain hell on yourself. Just letting you know, right? Not for me. I'm saying generally. If you go to escalate to your manager about somebody else in your team, you rain hell down on yourself, right? It's actually negative. You don't want to do that. You want to try and keep it contained as much as possible until you can't do anything about it. You have no choice. That's when you escalate, right? Escalating early is only there if someone's really misbehaving bad and it's taking your whole team out of, like, kind of throwing everything out of kilter, right? And then you want to escalate early. Otherwise, you got to have to deal with it. It's your dirty laundry. You keep it in your team, and you escalate only when it's necessary, right? But reassigning a task, that can be something you do. What, anyone else have any other recommendations? How about the team in the back? You guys didn't talk. Right, yeah, you guys. Yeah, you two. Yeah, tell me, is there any ideas? What would you do? So if someone's not producing, what do you do?
Try to meet with them one-on-one and see what else they think is interesting and what they.
Yeah, you get time to meet with one-on-one with people who don't produce?
No, like in other classes.
Just saying,
I'm
right?
talking about in this environment. Like if you're having other classes with them, you meet with them and see.
You could. You think, what if they say, hey man, I'm going to play games all day long, okay? That's my plan today. I'll catch you outside, you know? I'm just going to call it on Monday, right?
Bribe?
Huh?
Bribe them?
Bribe them, right?
Buy lunch.
Right?
Work.
Bribe them at lunch, right? You could bribe them, that might work, but that's going to cost you money, and it shouldn't cost you money to pass a class, right? So that's not good. You know, we got to talk about these things because it's happened. I'm telling you right now, people are producing, right? Because right now, I only see a couple people, maybe one person or two people that thought, hey, we're doing really well in that little poll, which isn't good. So you got to figure out ways, strategies. There's got to be a strategy of how to convert or people to your thinking, right? And part of the reason why this is happening is because we're going through team forming, right? Team forming, where someone is the producer, and you got to trust that person. They're the person that you're going to rely on to organize and to structure everything and whatever. You guys have elected that person because maybe one reason is because you don't want to be the producer. The other one is because you're lazy. You know, maybe you're not interested. You want to do something else, or you don't want to talk to me because usually I talk to the producer a lot. There's lots of little reasons why, but we need to support that person, and we need to support the team. Guys, if you don't work, I'll tell you right now, there's nothing that can save you, because this week, for a lot of you, it's crunch time, which means now it's like you're doing, like, I don't know, you're cramming for an exam. It's like that, right? This next week, instead of meeting once, you're probably going to have to meet twice, right? Which really sucks. You could have broken this out over a couple weeks, right? That's why we do this first playable as well, to kind of gauge how you guys are working together as a team. So team forming is hard, and that's probably one of the reasons why you're having some issues. But the producer is in charge, like I said last week, of, hey, let's get the plan going. Let's track how the plan is progressing, and I'm asking you to do that on your lab 3 today, and of course making sure that the game is eventually done. Here's something. How do we estimate our time? Okay, so I'm looking at the engineers now. Engineers, how did you estimate your time for your tasks? Right, so you have a task, player movement. Engineer, put up your hand. Who are you? Yeah. Your engineers, you're building your tasks for player movement. How long did you estimate for player movement to be done?
I don't know if we actually said it.
Hours. I want to know how many hours.
I don't think we actually said it.
Okay, how many hours did you plan for player movement? You didn't do it? Okay, how many hours did you plan for player movement?
I planned from 2 to 4 hours. 2
2 to 4 hours, okay. What else? How many hours did you plan for player movement? How much? A week? God damn it, man, right? That's a long time. All right, well, here's how it works, right? So we use something, Pert actually is a project management process that we use. And what we do is we kind of look at optimistic times. So let's say, for example, you said, I don't know, 3 hours or 4 hours, right? And then we look at the 3 hours. That's a really optimistic view. And people, human beings, we suck at estimation. We're terrible at it. We usually underestimate everything, right? Always. So let's say, especially if you haven't done it before. So let's say, or you have only done it maybe a couple times. So let's say you see 3 or 4 hours. That's optimistic for you, right? That's your kind of your best guess, right? And then pessimistic, double that, right? So now it's going to take 8 hours. So anywhere between, let's say, 3 or 4 and 8 hours, right, is going to be the time frame. The middle is most probable, or what we like to call realistic. So again, you have the 3 words here that I want you to remember for your exam, which are optimistic, realistic, pessimistic, right? Optimistic on the left, right? Realistic in the middle, pessimistic way on the right, right? And usually what we do is we assign a weighting. We assign a weighting for these things, right? And we say it's like, okay, I want you to assign a weight of 1 for your optimistic time. So if your optimistic time was 4 hours, multiply that by 1. Okay, so 4 times 1, 1, 4, there we go. And then your pessimistic time, that's 8 hours, multiply that by 1. All right, so you got 8 hours. 8 and 4 is 12. Okay, cool. And then your realistic time, which is somewhere in the middle, don't average it. You have to kind of think of more realistic time. Let's say 6 hours, right? We multiply that by 4. So we have 24, right, plus 4, plus 8, right? So 24 and 12 is really 36, right? Divide that by 6. So it's going to take around 6 hours for this thing. That's your estimate. Why is that? Because you don't know how long it's really going to take. And it's just an estimate. So now if you do that for every single task that you have, right, now you realize the scope of your project. Who's done that? Who's actually scoped out their project to figure out as a producer? Producers, I'm looking at you guys now, right? Who's scoped out their project and figured out how many hours they need to do their first playable? Anybody? I left it to you guys to see what you guys are going to do. Today, scope it out, please. I want to know how many hours you got left to do. Who's got to do what? I asked you this last week. I didn't put it in there. I was hoping somebody was going to ask me, so how much detail do you want, Tom? Do you want hours? Who's going to do what? How many hours they're going to spend? Because if you really put a number to it like this, you'll figure out you don't have a lot of time between now and next Friday, right? In fact, you have 0 time, right? You're already behind the 8 ball. So you have this plan, and a lot of times we think it's, we have some optimism in terms of when it's going to be done. A lot of times, for your first release, they say 12 to 18 months. We only have a week left for that one, for your first playable. But the problem is that producers are trying to reduce the risk. They do risk, containment, if you will, or you can also call it mitigate the risk. They mitigate the risk of you being out of band and not being able to produce, right? That's the real primary reason why we have a producer, because they're responsible for that as well as documentation. So here's some of the producers, some day-to-day stuff that they might do. Things like interfacing with team leads, like art director, designer, engineer, all those kind of things. They interface with you. They're the people that are communicating. And communication is the key, right? People said to me, I know before this class that, I didn't see any of my team. I don't even know who they are. Who's your producer? I don't even know his name. Guys, that's bad, right? You guys should each know the producer's name. The producer is the person that kind of links everybody together. So if you haven't met with your team, you need to do that. Assessing the game's progress, the producer can't do that on his own or her own. She's got to connect with the engineer, the art director, right, and the designer, and kind of go, okay, how are we doing, right? Well, I'm going to show you a tool later on today to help you with this, because we need a little bit of tools to help us. In GitHub, there's a tool we can use to help us track our progress. I guess we're going to do that right on GitHub. Evaluating gameplay, they can't evaluate gameplay on their own. They need to go to the QA person and say, hey, have you tested this game? Does it work? Now, is the play tester right now useful? Right now? Not really yet. Maybe they will be useful, but right now you don't have a playable yet. So how can they be useful other than helping the engineer code? And that's what the engineer should do. There's no way, I don't want you engineers to take on the whole coding, cycle yourself. There's not enough time. Break that up a little bit. Get the other person to code a little bit of it himself or herself. And I know it's challenging because you're working with somebody else. And whenever you break up work between you and somebody else, the challenge is they need to know what you're doing. You need to know what they're doing. You need to explain the process. That's overhead, right? Because now everyone needs to know your coding style. You may not agree. That's the exercise here. This beautiful exercise this semester, it's working with other people, which is really the killer in the industry. Okay, so keeping management happy. That's me, right? How do you keep me happy, producers? What do I need? What would you think in a real world a manager would need to be kept happy?
Deliver what you expect to be delivered.
I like.
That's
Okay, so I wanted you to deliver on time, within budget, and whatever you told me you're going to deliver, the scope of what you're delivering, you've done. right? So that's definitely one. What else do I need? What do I need as a manager, right? As a manager, am I going to implement anything? Yes.
So I use updates of like the work that's been going on.
Holy crap, that's perfectly right on, Emma. Updates. Okay, how often do I need updates? How often do I need updates? In this scenario, how often do I need updates? You can answer.
Brings it daily.
Daily? Weekly? How about once a week, like on Fridays? Right? I need an update. Last week I asked you guys to give me an update. Did anyone give me an update today? Do I have to ask you to give me an update? I don't have to ask you. You tell me the update. When I get together with you guys, it's your responsibility. Get together with me and tell me, hey, here's the update. Right? Here's where we are. We had a problem. Right? I'm glad that you guys are attending. This is awesome. Like this second section attends way more than the first section, which I'm really happy, to report for you guys. Bad for the first section, but but what I'm saying is, I need to be kept happy, and the way a manager in the real world is kept happy is a weekly report. So prepare it. I'm going to ask for it every week anyway. It's going to happen. I've asked you every single week so far, and I'm asking you today, right? Give me an update. Show me where you are, because I can't get into the nitty-gritty of your project. You got to tell me how you guys are doing, right? Which means the producer is my best friend. I'm going to go to them, or my worst enemy. I'm going to go to them and talk to them and say, hey, man or girl, how you doing? What's going on? How come this is not happening, right? And you're going to come up with solutions. Well, this is what happened. We didn't have this happen, and you're going to fix it. Here's the problem. If I asked you guys, okay, so you're the producer. So tell me, I'm going to go around here, so be prepared. What was the thing that stopped you from producing this week? Did you produce, first of all? Were you successful? Stand up. So everyone can hear you. Come on, stand up. I want everyone to hear your voice, and you can be recorded on YouTube Live. Go ahead. Tell me. Go ahead. Were you successful this week? That's a yes or no question.
I think so, a little bit.
It's a yes or no question.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. You're successful. Okay, cool. You're laughing, which means maybe you disagree. You're smiling. That's good. Okay, good. Yes, you were successful. Okay, so that's great. What were the highlights? What do you think you did really, really well then if you were successful? What things did you, name one thing that you did really, really well?
Communication. I did communicate with my team.
You did?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, communication was really good. Okay, great. Sit down. Sit down. Good. Thank you. Okay, next producer in this row. Stand up. Okay, tell me how things went this week. Was it good? You did well. Okay, tell me one thing that really went well this week and this week.
Everybody delivered what I asked.
Everyone delivered what you asked. That's fantastic. That's you guys one of the teams that says everything is working great, right? Thank you for that. Okay, this team here, producer. All right, tell me what happened. How did your team do this week?
We're doing well. Check where we have all the
Okay. Okay, so all the art assets, all that was done, you did well, right? And so tell me what you did really, really well this week, other than just producing.
Coding's done really, really well.
Coding?
Some more
Okay. You're one of the guys that your team says they don't know who you are, right? I'm just telling you feedback right now. This is candid feedback here, right here, right? Telling you right now. They told me that you didn't even know your name, right? So you did really, really well, did you? All right, sit down. How about this team over here, right? Stand up. Don't be lazy. Come on. Right?
I think we communicated well.
Okay, no. Did you deliver everything you're supposed to deliver this week?
Not a chance.
Not a chance. That's honest. I like that. Right?
Truthfully,
What stopped you from delivering? Okay, here's now. Listen to this technique. Okay. And I'm gonna write it down. I'm gonna write down this thing. Yeah, I know you guys can't see it online, but I'll show you later. Right? I'm gonna ask this question. Right? I'm gonna ask this question 5 times. So you didn't deliver. You didn't do well. Why don't you think you delivered this week? First, why?
people like video games.
Okay. What else? Keep going. Elaborate.
There's lots of talk and not a lot of action.
Okay. Why is there a lot of talk and not a lot of action?
Because people like to take on a role and be part of the group, etc. But then when it comes down to actually doing work, I don't think everyone's on the same page.
Okay. So why isn't everyone on the same page?
I guess it's my fault because I'm a producer.
Is that the reason?
I
You
don't-
see where I'm going
I
with
don't
this?
believe that.
Well, no. What do you believe? What is it you believe?
People are lazy.
Why are people lazy?
Or they have other commitments.
Why are people not? Why are people lazy or have other commitments? That's the fourth why I'm asking.
They don't take school seriously.
Why don't they take school seriously?
Personal reasons. I
Personal
guess.
reasons,
I don't-
right? That's great, Anna.
I
That's,
don't personally know.
you don't know, and we never know, right? Have a seat. Thanks. All right, so I'm not doing this because I want to blame anybody. Please don't take it like this. What I've really tried to do here is do something called root cause analysis, right? Root cause analysis. And I'm using the 5 whys method to do root cause analysis. Please don't make this the 5 blames, okay? It's not this. It's not 5 blames. Don't blame 5 people about what happened, okay? We don't want that. So if you look at 5 whys, if I actually look it up on the web for you, right? Let's do it together. So I go 5 whys analysis, right? You can read about it. It really talks about root cause or cause and effect, right? And if you really want to know, if you really want to needle somebody for information, ask them this question 5 times. And actually, it starts off with a kid. You know, if you ever hear a kid talking about stuff, if they ever ask things like, "Hey, Daddy, why is the sky blue?" And you're like, "Well," and you're trying to figure out what it is. You might say, "Well, it's because of the refraction of the sun as it passes through the atmosphere." Oh, why? Right? You're like, okay, it's because the light frequency gets separated because it hits different particles in the atmosphere, right? Why? Right? And then it's hard. It gets really, really hard to figure out what to answer them so they can understand, right? But the idea is it leads to a root cause of what the problem or why something is happening, right? So it's a good way of questioning. It's a questioning technique. And I want you guys to use this when it comes to thinking about working together. When you ask a question, if someone's not producing, right, I want you to ask these questions. All right, so you're approving milestones. So one of the things that the producer does is approve milestones, and the milestone should be first playable, right? Your first milestone should be your first playable, right? You might have smaller milestones too. You might have little functionality milestones as well if you really want to, right? But the producer is going to go through and approve all these little milestones, right? And think about a milestone as a unit of work, right? That's been completed by the team or by an individual, and the user has got to go, the producer is going to go through and somehow check to see that it meets requirements and say approve, right? That means the producer doesn't have all the smarts. That producer is not the smartest person in the room. You guys, your team is smarter typically as a whole than the producer by himself or herself, so that she or he has to contact or connect with the other people in the team to confirm that this is good. Filling out paperwork is huge because, and we're going to talk about that today, one of the jobs for the producers today, right, is to give me an update, a progress report, and for next week to produce a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to be, because you're going to be presenting your first playable. I'm laughing because you guys, half of you haven't started, right? Let's talk about the design cycle. And again, I'll take a break soon because I don't want to keep talking ad nauseum. But you know, we got to cover some of this material so to make sure that we're good. So think about how the designer spends their day, right? They think about things like implementing gameplay, and that means like looking at their prototypes and talking with the engineer, saying, okay, let's work together, engineer. Show me your movement. Does that really meet requirements for our game? Does that meet what we've decided as a team, or what I've decided as a designer, how I want this thing to move, right? And then check with them to see how it works. When we say tweaking features, the designer can't tweak the features. He or she has to work with the engineer and maybe the quality assurance person in your team, in your environment, to tweak the features, right? That's how it's got to be done. It can't be done. They can't work in a vacuum here, right? Feedback is key, right? We just talked about being candid. You got to give candid feedback to your artists and your designers, and even to your engineer, because if you don't give feedback, then they don't know that they're not running in the right direction. And a good example when I say running in the right direction, I want you to think about this, right? Let's say you and I start in a race. So Ethan and I, we're in a race, right? And we're supposed to meet the finish line, which is at the end of the classroom. But I run this way, right? Ethan runs that way. I get to that side really, really fast. Really fast. I get faster than he got there, right? But I went that way, and I'm supposed to go this way. Was I successful? I ran really fast, like I talked about last week. I talked about a couple weeks ago about a guy last semester who said, like, I did all this work, right? But his work sucked. Like his team didn't like his work at all, right? That's really bad, right? That's really bad. Bad for the team and really bad for him. So I don't want that to happen. Please provide feedback. We talked about that at length. So things that we have to make sure that the designer is in charge of. And remember, for our first playable, what I'm looking for, which I'll go into more detail afterwards, is basic mechanics. I want to see your basic mechanic working. So I need to see movement. I need to see some kind of obstacle or some kind of enemy, some kind of challenge for the first level, right? I need to see, your basic artwork. It doesn't have to be your finalized artwork. It could be placeholder right now. But your designer is going to come up and say, yeah, this meets requirements for now. For our first playable, this meets requirements, right? They might also include things like working to get the dialogue right. If they were going to do kind of a 3D scene, we're not doing that in this course, but that's what they're in charge of. How the user interface looks, all that kind of stuff is in the realm of the designer from an approval perspective. Play testing, they got to make sure that the play testing is done, right? So they can give feedback, right, to the engineer. So they work closely with the QA person. So that might be another person to work and play test. You want to play test this stuff as often and as early as you can. And the reason for this is because if you wait to play test it later on, imagine, I don't play test anything until beta. That's crazy, man, right? I can make a beautiful game that I think is beautiful, but you play it and you don't like it, or you want some changes, and we're at beta already? No, that doesn't happen, right? You play test throughout, and you play test often, right? And think about whoever your play tester is for your game. I want that person up here testing the game next week, right? They're the person that's going to sit in this chair right here play testing. So if you have a QA person who's going to play test, that person is going to sit in the chair, control the PowerPoint, and test your game out. You want to get as much feedback as possible from the players or your play testing group, whoever that is, as early as you can to influence change. So when we talk about that plan, do, check, act, that's some of the feedback we get in so that we can make those changes, so we can iterate and improve. From our perspective, you have these deliverables. It's very similar to what we talked about with the design, on the design side, right? One of the things we want to try and do, which I mentioned earlier, is track assets. All right, so you have a bunch of assets you get, right? Who's gonna create their own assets in the room? Anybody? Oh, that's cool. I got one person from the other section as well. Jamie, yeah, maybe you're gonna create some assets too. All right, that's cool, right? So if you create your assets, or if you're gonna get your assets, acquire them from somewhere, you gotta make sure that they're approved by the designer. Don't just get random assets. I'm gonna give you some examples of that later on when I show you some of the work from last semester. I'm gonna show you that work in terms of their PowerPoints. And I want you to tell me, give me feedback, straight, honest feedback, right? And you can do that because they're not here, right? What did you think about the assets and about the way that everything looks, right? And try and be nice about it. I know it's hard. We talked about prototyping. I'm not going to talk about that again, but you can still definitely use your paper prototypes from an asset perspective. So you create almost like a paper prototype or concept art, and you pin it. You can actually use it to, so what does this prototype look like with the rest of the artwork? Does it match our design, our concept, right? And you want to do that because, again, you don't want to use an asset that just doesn't work. There's a lot of work. Like when you start prototyping or you start drawing an asset, you may not do a finishing work on it. You might just do a prelim in terms of how you create your asset. And if people like what it looks like, they have a good idea of what it looks like, and they like the style and it meets requirements, then finish it off and polish it to perfection, right? Otherwise, imagine polishing a piece and then giving it to somebody and they're like, nope. How about this one? Nope. How about this one? Nope. And you spend hours and hours polishing this as an artist. Again, I'm going to ask you to have thick skins here. And it's not, when we talk about your artwork, it's not, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about your artwork. It doesn't meet, right? A lot of times we use commercial software packages to create our artwork. I know for a fact that people that work at Ubisoft, I know some artists that work at Ubisoft as concept artists as well as designers. And some of the package they use for drawing might be even Sketchbook Pro for things like creating storyboards. There's certain software for that they use. It's just escaping me in my head right now. And they also do Toon Boom. They use Toon Boom for storyboards. And we use things like either Maya or 3D Studio Max for modeling, right? We use commercial software to create our stuff. And it's part of the pipeline. Part of the pipeline is, doing some concepts, doing a better sketch, and then using a commercial software package so you can share your concepts and your artwork with others, right? Now, in your case, most of you, only a couple of you said that you're going to create your own artwork, right? You're going to grab this stuff from other sources. I suggested Open Game Art or other places like that. Make sure, like, again, when you do tracking, one of your jobs as an asset manager or an art director is tracking all your assets in a grid, like some kind of Excel spreadsheet that says, okay, here's my asset. This is where I got it from. Is it approved or not? This is my asset. Here's where I got it from. Is it approved? And you should get approval for each one of them. And if it's not, put an X in there and say, look, I got this asset, but you said no, right? So that way, so you have the assets you want. You put them in a folder or directory, and you have access to them. I recommend you also put them up on GitHub, so just in case you lose them, for backup purposes, they're up there and you can access them with your team. Last part, engineering. So again, what I want to talk about here is the idea of making regular builds, right? Our build cycle right now, so far, has been our first playable. That's our build, the first build you're making, right? It's almost like your baseline build. The first build you're making is your baseline that you're going to base everything else off of, right? Your baseline build. And, but, you may, as you're going, you're going to continually build out your functionality. You might have a nightly build. You might have a weekly build. Whatever your build cycle is, right? What you want to do is every time you add a feature, like I asked you last week, please do a commit or one or more commits on GitHub. Don't wait for your entire process to be done. This is where you're going to get judged next week from a GitHub perspective, right? If I only see one commit on GitHub for your final release next week, which is going to be your first playable, that's bad, man. That means you just slapped it up on GitHub after you're done. That's not what we want to do, right? We want you to work with GitHub throughout the entire time, and we want you to do multiple builds. Every time you do a functionality or add something, I want you to do another commit, and I want you to put it up on GitHub. One of the things they talk about here is debugging. It's important for you guys to have a process when it comes to debugging, and you have a QA person with you to help you debug. So there's different kinds of errors you can get, right? There's a syntax error. Those are the easy ones to fix, right? You see a syntax error, it turns red, you fix it. Then there's a systemic error. You look at it and you're like, why is this an error? Why isn't this working? There's no error. I don't get a syntax error. That's a more difficult one to fix. And the other kind of errors are, oh man, that's not what I wanted. That's an error. Not an error in terms of the program, but an error in terms of what you're producing, right? And that's the kind of error your QA person can easily catch by when they do their play testing. So that's it for this. For the production cycle, I want you to know those things when it comes to talk about them on the exam. So if I ask you any questions around the stuff I talked about, those pieces, prototyping, we talked about the Deming cycle, plan, do, check, act. We talked about estimation. What are the three things I want you to talk about when it comes to estimation? Three things when you estimate something. We suck at estimation. Yeah, what are they? Optimistic, realistic, and pessimistic. Those three things, right? And we take that, we can use a little formula, right? We can take them, divide it by 6. We assign 1 weight point to optimistic, 1 weight point to pessimistic, and 4 weighting to your realistic. And usually for realistic, time frames, you want to kind of get an idea from the team. Hey, buddy, what do you think it's going to take? About 3 hours? What do you think? About 4 hours? You get a kind of a more of a realistic time frame in there, and you're probably all going to be wrong, by the way, right? And that's why you have your pessimistic time in there, and it's going to give you a little bit more time, a little bit more slack, no pun intended, between your most probable time and your pessimistic time. All right, so we're going to talk about that. We talked about that in here. A little bit about the art director and their responsibilities, the engineer and their responsibilities, the producer and their responsibilities, and how their day looks. That's what we talked about in this particular PowerPoint, in this particular presentation. Please use this video because I'm going to use it when it comes to making your exam. And so for now, let's take a short break. We're sitting at exactly 2 o'clock, approximately 2:01. Let's take 5 minutes, and when we come back, I'm going to be okay. 10 minutes. We'll talk about. In 10 minutes, we'll talk about what's due today. What's due next week, and how I want to talk about show you some PowerPoints from last semester. Let's go. Go ahead.